In the hospital corridor, I met Mark again. He was supporting Cecilia, sitting outside the ultrasound room, tenderness filling his eyes. I kept my head down and strode toward the supply room when a sharp scream suddenly erupted from the crowd. An elderly patient sat in a wheelchair, his face purple, clearly with something obstructing his airway. I pushed through the crowd, tipped the patient forward, and began striking his back with an open palm. Finally, thick fluid gushed from his mouth, even splattering onto my uniform. The patient's breathing gradually steadied, and his complexion returned to a healthy color. Luckily, for my last life, I had accumulated experience and knew many techniques for these emergencies. The patient's relatives kept thanking me, hastily wheeling him into the ward for examination. Mark's mocking laughter sounded behind me. Looks like you didn't get far. Born to be a lowly caregiver. Lucky for me, I run fast. Won't make the same mistake. In my previous life, I had no diploma and could only work as a hard-working, uncomplaining caregiver in a hospital. On the day of the blind date, when Mark learned my job, he praised it repeatedly as a warm profession and complimented me for being compassionate. Because of that, I immediately took a liking to him, and we soon spoke of marriage. But later, when relatives asked about my work, Mark wore an expression of contempt. He still thinks I'm disgraceful. I couldn't be bothered to respond, and went straight past them. Perhaps the scent on my clothes was too overpowering. Cecilia suddenly clutched her chest and bent over, retching violently. In an instant, the floor was covered in a large mess. I covered my nose and hurriedly backed away. Mark frowned, gently caressing her back with care, whispering comfortingly, "My dear wife, you've really had a hard time." The next second, he grabbed my clothes, adopting an arrogant, rude posture, and shouted, "What are you standing there for? Hurry up and come clean this up." Hearing Mark's tone, Cecilia was a bit stunned. "Honey, don't be so harsh. Just speak to her nicely." Seeing me clamping my nose shut, Mark snorted coldly. "What are you acting so noble for? Isn't this your job? When you're having a run of bad luck, it comes in waves." I spilled an entire cup of coffee on myself this morning. Luckily, the caregiver Andy lent me some clothes. I was about to head to logistics to pick up a new white coat when I ran into Mark and was even mistaken for a caregiver. "Sorry, I don't like dirt," I said, glancing at him, yanking my hand away and covering my nose in disgust. At that, Cecilia's face went ashen. A flash of hostility appeared in her eyes. Snide remarks in the crowd buzzed in my ears. "Caregivers have rates. You gotta pay before they do the work. Yeah, a few $100 a day. Easy money. That's human nature. People see someone else profiting and get jealous, no matter how much effort went into it. All the more so in a hospital overflowing with negative energy." Mark's mouth curled higher, looking down on me with a slant. "You still have the nerve to ask for money. If it weren't for the smell on you, my wife wouldn't be feeling so unwell. Clean the floor first, then apologize to my wife." I lifted my gaze. Mark's brow arched, his eyes full of annoyance. Cecilia, in his arms, bit her lip, her pregnant belly jutting out as she looked wronged in a way that would make anyone feel pity. I raised an eyebrow and answered calmly, "If you can't stand the smell, then wear a mask more often. This is a public place, not your home." No sooner had the words left my mouth than accusations poured like a drop of water into hot oil, thin and relentless. How can you be so mean to a pregnant woman? No compassion at all. She's just a caregiver, and she talks bigger than a doctor. My throat tasted bitter. I didn't want to make things worse, and was about to leave when Mark stopped me. "Claire, if you'd listened to me back then and not taken such a degrading job, you wouldn't have fallen so far. Now we're worlds apart." The Mark before me was dressed in an expensive designer suit, a green submariner glinting on his wrist. Behind him stood 2 bodyguards in sunglasses. This time he had finally achieved the life he'd always dreamed of. In my previous life, I saw the same watch in a forum post and, after much hesitation, bought it on our anniversary. He took the watch with excitement and, full of affection, said marrying me was the luckiest thing that ever happened to him. The next day, he came home from work with black look and launched into a barrage of insults. You bought me a fake watch as a gift. Are you trying to make me look ridiculous? Well, with your salary, what good thing could you possibly afford? When he finished speaking, the watch slipped from his hand and fell to the floor, shards scattering like a shattered dream. When I went to confront the person who had posted it, I found I had been blocked. I cried the whole night, not over the loss of several months' wages, but over the cold mockery of the person beside me. Mark exploded because that day Cecilia was getting married and her husband wore the same model of watch. When they shook hands, the difference between real and fake was obvious at a glance. Cecilia was Mark's first love. Their families were worlds apart, and they had been torn apart by the Dew family when they first got together. To avoid leaving a seriously ill mother with regrets, Mark agreed to an arranged match and hurriedly registered our marriage. In the first few years after we married, I devoted myself to caring for my mother-in-law. He was grateful, and we treated each other with courtesy as husband and wife. Although the excessive medical bills made the household suffer, the family atmosphere was still relatively harmonious. I never expected that after my mother-in-law died, Mark would feel so relieved that he immediately became a different person. He started finding fault with me at every turn. The slightest thing he didn't like sparked cold wars, and sometimes he didn't come home all night. I kept telling myself over and over that Mark wasn't an ungrateful person. He was just under a lot of work pressure. Later, I took on multiple jobs. By day, I worked as a caregiver at the hospital, and at night, I cleaned rooms at a hotel, determined to help shoulder his burdens. But on Valentine's Day, I saw with my own eyes Mark holding Cecilia as they walked into a hotel room and didn't come out all night. I was shaking in a corner and took out my phone to photograph them. After I sent the photos to the D family, Mark flew into a rage and grabbed my hair, slamming my head against the wall. "You ruined Cecilia. If anything happens to her, don't think you'll get to live. I cheated only because of you. I know I'm obsessive about cleanliness, yet you went and did dirty work. If you don't disgust me, I don't know what does. Cecilia is the only one who can give me the life I want." The blood on my forehead blurred my vision, mingling with tears as it slid slowly down my cheek. It wasn't that I hadn't thought about finding a better job, but after years of caring for my mother-in-law, I had long been cut off from society. It was hard to learn new skills. Besides, I excelled at nursing, and the hospital paid me handsomely, much more than outside. Cecilia took him to all kinds of upscale places, letting him taste the pleasures of luxury. Mark kept saying he was fastidious, yet he would accept a drunk Cecilia vomiting all over him. He simply looked down on me, or he never loved me at all. When Mark learned that Cecilia had been confined by her husband, he kicked my stomach hard a few times in fury. Without another word, he grabbed his car keys and stormed out, fearing for his safety. I stifled the pain and followed him into the elevator. He thought I was still trying to cling to him and raised his hand to slap me. Perhaps he was too violent. Suddenly, the elevator dropped. When I opened my eyes again, we had both somehow been sent back to that blind date 7 years ago. This time, ignoring our parent objections, we resolutely refused to exchange contact information and each set off toward our own futures. He chose to win back his first love, to escape the Dew family's control, and elope with her abroad to register their marriage at once. I chose my career instead, studying relentlessly and taking exams, replanning my life goals. In this life, I was still determined to shine in medicine. But this time, it wasn't nursing. I switched to obstetrics and gynecology. Long illness makes one a doctor. In my previous life, because of infertility, I had almost been to every hospital. With the 7 extra years of awareness I gained, I understood clearly how grave the future problem of having children would be. So, I decided to devote myself to studying related knowledge. I even invented several pregnancy surgeries and achieved good medical results. When I saw Cecilia's intake file, I began looking forward to the day I'd meet Mark. I hadn't expected such an embarrassing scene, but since we were meeting, I wasn't going to let them off easy. The onlookers grew, pressing in so tightly there was no room to breathe. The sharp-eyed among them recognized us as the Dew family's son and the wealthy son-in-law and couldn't help but gasp. Who says the rich don't have love? Accompanying your wife to a prenatal checkup, like this beats many men hands down. He even knelt at the door for 10 whole days to win her family's approval. If he didn't have some ability, why would my father-in-law have entrusted the company to him to manage? Hearing this, Mark's expression stiffened. He still tried to keep his composure. A man who went around calling himself the head of the household had actually humbled himself to be a son-in-law living off a wealthy family. He must love her deeply to be willing to stoop so low. A surge of disgust pulsed in my chest. I didn't want to spar with him, so I said, "Cooley, please step aside and don't delay my consultation. I'm a doctor, not a caregiver or a cleaner." Mark snorted as if he'd heard the funniest thing in the world, his face full of derision. Our hospital standards are so low now. Caregivers can give consultations. Not long ago, the director begged me to supply medical equipment. It seems like I had reason to turn him down. Cecilia leaned weakly against Mark, pointed at my clothes with a finger, and smiled faintly. "That's the badge number embroidered on it, right? There's no need to embarrass the dean. Just call and file a complaint directly." The two of them struck the same haughty pose, which was nauseating and made me want to take 3 steps back. When she took out her phone, I quickly covered my clothes, afraid of implicating the kind nursing aide. To everyone watching, my reaction looked like that of a guilty thief. Look at her behavior. How dare she pretend to be a doctor? She even lies in front of Miss Cecilia, utterly shameless. I couldn't be bothered with the flattery of others and strode off in the opposite direction. I had only taken a few steps when a woman's sly, sinister laugh reached my ears. "If she won't let us look, strip her clothes off." 2 black-clad figures appeared in front of me. The bodyguards roughly pried my hands apart, trying to force my uniform off. I clutched my chest tightly. Pain shot through my wrists, but I couldn't match the humiliation of my dignity being trampled. Mark stood with his arms crossed over his chest, looking down at me from above. Cats most enjoy holding a mouse by the tail, driving it to the brink of death, then devouring it in one bite. As I let out a scream, several security guards quickly surged in. The 2 bodyguards immediately released me and waved their hands to show they were innocent. A sharp female voice suddenly sounded from behind. "Director Claire, what are you standing here for? I've been waiting for you in logistics forever. Hurry up and put your clothes back on." Huh? Who didn't have the decency to vomit on the floor like this? Has no public spirit at all. The orderly Annie cursed viciously, not forgetting to thrust the freshly laundered white coat into my hands. Cecilia said nothing, biting her lip hard. By the time I pulled on the white coat and stepped out of the restroom with a stethoscope around my neck, the crowd had thinned considerably. Mark stared at me with piercing eyes and forced the words through his clenched teeth. What real skill could you possibly have? No sooner had the words left the doctor's mouth than the technician in the ultrasound room frowned, stood at the doorway, and urgently called Cecilia's name. "You're carrying twins. One of the fetuses shows abnormal development. I recommend you go to the 12th floor and consult Director Claire." Cecilia's expression collapsed. She nearly swooned, tears brimming as she asked, "Doctor, what is usually done in a case like this?" Seeing her crying with streaming tears, the doctor offered pitying reassurance. "The usual recommendation is a selective reduction to preserve the healthy fetus. Rest assured, Director Claire is among the top in the field." Mark's mind short-circuited. He stared at the report in his hand, eyes wide, unable to speak for a long time. At last his hoarse voice came. May I have your contact information?" It was Claire. "Hey, what a coincidence. Director Claire is right behind you." At that, the 2 of them turned to look at me at the same time, their eyes nearly popping out in shock. When I arrived at the department, it was already crowded to overflowing. The patients' furrowed brows gradually smoothed as I greeted each of them warmly. It's hard for doctors and patients to truly empathize with one another. You have to live 2 lives to understand how difficult it is. In just a few years, I managed to make a modest name for myself in the medical world. Beyond medical skill, it was my emphasis on humanistic care for patients that mattered more. Having been caught in the rain myself, I wanted to hold an umbrella for others. After a busy morning, I had almost finished seeing all the patients and hadn't even had time to catch my breath when the door suddenly slammed open. Mark pushed Cecilia in on a wheelchair and arrogantly tossed a stack of reports onto the desk. I gently nudged him to the floor with my elbow, squinted, and said, "Please respect the order." No cutting in line. Mark was about to step forward to say something, but Cecilia stopped him. She looked up and scanned the banners hanging on the wall, then said coldly, "Director Claire keeps winning the Best Doctor award. It seems the honor doesn't match the person. I only wanted to inquire about the fetal condition at the affiliated hospital, and instead of helping you, you put on airs and humiliate me, using personal grudges to take revenge on patients. How can you talk about the compassion of a physician?" Her voice grew louder, the sharp bitterness, and it drew a crowd. Cecilia knew how to stir up doctor-patient conflict and brandished the banner of morality to condemn me in public. She put on a pitiable look, and the pregnant women present were quite moved, some even stepping forward to offer comfort. I sighed, shook my head gently, and said, "Miss Cecilia, I heard you're a psychotherapist and run a fairly sizable clinic." She blinked in slight surprise, then curled her mouth into a pleased, confident nod. I unlocked my phone, pulled up photos of the clinic's fees, and mirrored them onto the big screen. I rubbed my chin, pointed at the prices, and asked with a puzzled tone, "Excuse me, what do you mean by premium consultation and regular consultation?" So, in Dr. Cecilia's mind, patients are ranked into hierarchies. To prevent Cecilia from having a chance to object, I immediately covered my mouth and feigned surprise. My God, no way. This is what you call a doctor's parental heart. Then I hit play again. A while ago, I'd come across an exposed post about Cecilia's clinic. The patient vented in anger about being treated differently, charged differently, and the doctor's completely unequal attitude. They even recorded the charges in the clinic and Cecilia's sharp, mean-faced remarks. "You'll be charged a regular treatment fee. Just explain your symptoms. Don't tell me too much about negative emotions." Hey, what kind of way is that to speak? Can a psychotherapist judge an illness without listening to a patient's emotions? At the end of the video, Cecilia drove the patient out the door, leaving only one sentence. "I treat ailments of the heart. I can't cure poverty." The moment those words dropped, everyone shot contemptuous looks at Cecilia. A matron standing at the front snorted loudly through her nose, disdain in her tone. "Playing the saint while acting like you look decent enough. But who knew you had such a black heart? Director Claire actually gets things done. Who are you to moralize her? If you need to see a doctor, wait in line like everyone else." In an instant, the scene erupted like water hitting a hot pan. A barrage of insults poured out. The DW family's pampered daughter had never endured such humiliation. Cecilia pressed her lips together, her knuckles widening on the wheelchair's armrest, a fire in her eyes that seemed ready to devour me. Sensing things were going sideways, Mark immediately pulled out his phone and brought in reinforcements to apply pressure. Before long, Dan Sue came trotting over and quickly got up to speed on everything. He read Cecilia's report carefully, his expression gravely suggesting that an abortion was urgent and could not be delayed. Indeed, the further along the pregnancy, the greater the surgical risk. Dean Sue waved a hand at me and smoothed things over with a diplomatic tone. "Cecilia, Mr. Mark, and Miss Cecilia are our hospital's equipment suppliers. Pregnant women are emotionally volatile, and Mr. Mark is just anxious to protect his wife. Don't make a fuss. For heaven's sake, don't let personal grudges cause losses for the hospital." On the surface, Dean Sue's words sounded like conflict resolution, but in reality, he had already decided I was in the wrong, especially after hearing I refused the operation. He took it as further proof that I was retaliating against Mark. He muttered on for a long time until my eardrums began to hurt. I cut him off impatiently. I can be the lead surgeon. After all, I filed the patent for the uterine cavity reduction procedure. The moment the words left my mouth, joy lit up all three of their faces at once. I rolled up my sleeve to reveal a wrist wrapped in white gauze and said with a smile, "Too bad my wrist was twisted by two oblivious things. I won't blame you for hurting me, so don't mind if my knife is unsteady." Cecilia went outside to make a phone call and came back a long time later, her face drained. I was right. She must have been trying to find another doctor to take over. Unfortunately, no one could replace me for this operation. Just when I thought I could get away, Mark blocked me in the stairwell. "Claire, you're just jealous. You can't have a child, so you want to use mine to get back at me?" I raised an eyebrow at him and found myself at a loss for words. After 7 years of marriage, I had tried every traditional remedy, swallowed hundreds of pills and herbs for a weak kidney. Yet, I still couldn't conceive. Mark insisted it was my long-term exposure to viruses that caused hidden health problems. He believed I must have had an underlying condition when I married him. He couldn't accept that I had fallen in love at first sight. Later, when the hospital assigned me to work as an orderly in the obstetrics and gynecology ward, I finally learned the real reason for our infertility. Mark's sperm were abnormal and genetically incompatible with mine, making natural conception impossible. At that point, what had happened no longer mattered. I said calmly, "This is how I always speak. If it hurts you, you'll have to bear with it." That child is quite lucky to have proactively escaped parents with such poor character. I twisted my wrist. Though the pain was sharp, I felt an unexpected relief, almost exhilarated. At that moment, my phone buzzed with a message. I opened it to see it was from Ethan, and the gloom vanished. "Your Majesty the wife, I'll pick you up after work. Behave and wait for me." My mouth kept curling into a smile. I picked a heart emoji and sent it. Through the phone's dark screen, Mark's sinister eyes were reflected back at me. "Who are you sending hearts to? A boyfriend? Didn't you pose before that you'd never marry?" He peppered me with questions one after another, making me feel like I committed some terrible crime. I rolled my eyes at him, thinking this guy's nosiness rivaled the Pacific. Mr. Mark himself, lurking in my posts all day to spy. Disgusting. No need for that. We're not that close. And whether I have a boyfriend or not is none of your damn business. His face and the muscles around it were visibly stiff. From the corridor came Dan Sue's call. I pushed him away and left without looking back. In the office, Dean Jew looked embarrassed, smiling awkwardly. "Cecilia, please don't take it to heart. My words were a bit harsh just now." I assured him I understood. After all, the D Group donates a great deal to hospital every year, especially to mechanical equipment, which is far more advanced than others. As dean, of course, he had many considerations. "I just saw the x-rays of your wrist. It's indeed a ligament strain. But could you do me a favor and let the surgery be performed under your full guidance?" Although I was skilled at this operation, there were still risks given Cecilia's condition. Seeing the white hair creeping to the sides of Dean Jew's temples made my nose twinge. If it weren't for his strong recommendation back then, it would have been hard for me to get into this hospital. The worst thing in the workplace is owing favors. Out of respect for the director's face, I chose to agree. To prevent accidents, I specifically went to get a nerve block injection. Lying on the operating table, Cecilia's expression was complicated. She ground her teeth and threatened, "Claire, don't have any evil ideas or you'll regret it. The other child absolutely must be fine. She's the only daughter of the D family. Her child is the future heir." If I hadn't seen Mark sign the consent form with my own eyes, I truly wouldn't have dared to go through with it for fear of stirring trouble. I ignored her and turned to the anesthetist to signal for a larger dose. The one holding the scalpel was my student, whose technique I trusted. The whole operation went more or less smoothly. Fortunately, there wasn't excessive adhesion between the two embryos. The one that had stopped developing had already shriveled. Just as she was cleaning out the blood clots, an alarm suddenly sounded on the monitor. Cecilia's oxygen saturation was falling slowly, and her heart rate was dropping. I immediately picked up the scalpel to assist with suturing and raced against time to save her. Life hung by a thread as I placed the defibrillator paddles on her chest. 1 shock, 2, 3. My hands trembled uncontrollably. Even though I despised Cecilia, she didn't deserve to die on the operating table. Beep, beep. The ECG sounded again, and at last she survived. Stepping out of the operating room, I saw a familiar figure, 1m88 in height, with a deep, handsome profile. Who else could it be but Ethan? I sprang onto him happily, burying my head in his solid chest, greedily nuzzling back and forth. Ethan pressed a light kiss to my forehead and indulgently said, "My lady wife, I'm here to pick you up from work and take you home." These days, Ethan had taken on a thorny case and worked many extra days in a row. I stroked the shadow under his eyes with a hurting heart and planted a kiss on his face. Seeing this intimate scene, people murmured, "Director Claire is so lucky to have such a handsome boyfriend pick her up from work. Oh my, this guy is so handsome. Those long legs are basically model standards. Someday I'll have to ask Director Claire where she burned incense to get such a top-quality match." Ethan became the center of attention. A few nurses even came over to steal glances. He paid no mind to the others' heated stares, leaning close to my ear to whisper, "You look even better in a nurse's outfit." My face flushed in an instant, and I playfully pinched his arm in mock reproach. The biggest difference between Ethan and Mark was that he never brought negative emotions home. In court, he was a sharp-tongued, eloquent lawyer. With me, he transformed into a devoted little wolf dog, doting on me in every way. All the pain I endured in my last life's marriage had turned into sweetness in this one. As Ethan slipped his arm around my waist and was about to walk away, Mark's furious voice suddenly rang out from behind. "Claire, you're my wife. How can you let another man touch you?" My husband's face immediately darkened. It was obvious the man's anger had been kindled. The hand around my waist tightened, and he turned to look at Mark challengingly. "You forgot to introduce yourself. I'm Claire's legal husband." He held up his finger and shook the wedding ring on it. In an instant, a flash of despair crossed the young nurses' faces. Hearing Ethan's domineering declaration, a warm current flowed through me. Mark hesitated, a vein bulging on his forehead as he forced out, "But you said you wouldn't get married." I almost laughed in anger. That vow of never marrying was a post I made after my rebirth, and had long since been deleted. Women, after all, can be fickle. "Mr. Mark, your wife is still under anesthesia. Don't go mistaking someone else for her. Not only does that ruin my reputation, it also damages your image as a loving husband." At the sound of that, Mark's face instantly grew even uglier. He had clearly meant to show off in front of me, but ended up getting fed a mouthful of dog food instead. Mark grew a little desperate, wanting to keep sparring with me. At that moment, the operating room door opened, and Cecilia was wheeled out. He immediately reined in his gaze, put on a look of tender devotion, and squeezed Cecilia's hand tightly. "Honey, you work hard." Perhaps because Ethan was beside me, or perhaps because I'd seen that nauseating scene before, I felt not an iota of emotion stir within me, looking at the loving couple before me. I smiled and said, "Parents must do more good deeds to bring blessings to their descendants. Mr. Mark, take good care of your family. Don't leave any regrets behind." Could it be that seeing me so sharp-tongued made him unable to help but snort with laughter? So, it turns out that when the wife is pushed, she can be just as aggressive. No wonder you're my destined partner. What can I do? I adore you like this. Seeing him shameless like that, I shook my head helplessly. Mark's back teeth clicked together, and his clenched fist slowly unfurled. He can swagger and show off in front of me. But the moment Cecilia appears, he doesn't even dare to breathe heavily. Being a son-in-law in a wealthy family isn't so easy. All the fame and fortune he enjoys now are thanks to the Dew family. I thought once Cecilia was discharged, life would finally quiet down. I had just climbed into my husband's sports car, ready to head to the seaside when I got a call. "Claire, someone has reported you for taking a bribe. Please come to the administrative office." After I hung up, I collapsed like a deflated balloon. "Honey, what we do? I think a mad dog has set its sights on me." The car screeched to a halt. My husband turned to me and lightly stroked my nose. "If a mad dog tries to bite you, hit back with a stick. What are you afraid of? I'll back you. If they're going to make a fuss, let them make a big one." I almost forgot. Ethan wasn't a good sort either. In the administrative office, Cecilia insisted outright that I had accepted her red envelope. And sure enough, they found an envelope stuffed with 20,000 yuan in the pocket of my white coat, with both witness and physical evidence. The looks from the disciplinary staff present changed toward me completely. The pure remained pure. I had long since grown used to that kind of gaze. I only looked at Cecilia calmly. "Then tell me, Under what circumstances did you bribe someone? Cecilia hesitated, and after a long moment, she spoke. When you palpated the fetal position, you pointed at the pocket with your finger, signaling me to put it in. Many patients will attempt bribery at such close quarters. They always assume money will make things easier, not realizing they foster a corrupt atmosphere. Colleagues in obstetrics and gynecology all know I never wear clothing with pockets. Even my lab coat has its pockets sewn shut, so patients have no opportunity to exploit them. I watched expressionless and asked lightly, if it was a bribe, then why could it still be found in her pocket? Wouldn't I have taken it already? Before I finished, Cecilia immediately cut in. Who knows? Maybe she forgot and planned to come take it tomorrow. The red envelope was found in my office. That alone left me speechless. I was already regretting why I had softened and saved this mad dog. Once a doctor is accused of taking a bribe, even if later cleared, people will still jab at their spine. Seeing that I didn't answer, Cecilia's face grew even more smug, and she shouted at the discipline inspectors. If you dare to show favoritism, I promise to sue you all. There are witnesses and evidence. If she can't prove herself, that's an admission. Several disciplinary committee members hurriedly nodded, as if afraid of angering the young miss before them. Claire, do you have anything more to say? I yawned and shook my head. Mark beside me looked at me in disbelief, clearly not expecting me to give up defending myself. A flicker of guilt crossed his eyes. Words are useless. I'll show you something. Before long, I streamed the surveillance footage from my phone onto the big screen. On the screen, it was clear that when I was palpating Cecilia's fetal position from inside, Mark had hung the new white coat on the wall. Within seconds, he slipped out. For the dozen or so hours that followed, the coat stayed hanging there untouched until the disciplinary committee took it away. I feigned surprise and shouted. So, it was a married couple working together, a feint to the east and an attack to the west. Everyone present immediately changed their faces. So, it was a misunderstanding. Good thing the video cleared it up. Director Claire, we blamed you for listening to other people. Since you're not a suspect, you can leave. Yes. The rest of the matter will be handled by us. The dean came out at just the right moment, repeatedly apologizing. I didn't want to keep arguing. I had just stood up to leave when unexpectedly someone burst in. Ethan's eyes glinted with cold, his voice ice hard. Leave it to you to handle. God knows if you're all in cahoots. What kind of misunderstanding is this? It's clearly a deliberate frame-up, an attack on someone's reputation. I demand you deal with this immediately. Bring the people involved back for interrogation and detain them. Mark's face drained of color. He sprang to his feet and barked. Who do you think you are telling us what to do here? At that, Ethan snorted coldly. You'll find out soon enough what I am. After speaking, he immediately pulled out his phone and dialed Cecilia's father, David. The thorny case Ethan had recently taken on was precisely about D Group's tax dispute. No one in the country dared to take this case. The chances of winning were vanishingly small. David pulled every string he had to persuade Ethan to take it. In other words, if Ethan hadn't stepped in, D Group would have faced massive fines and losses. Less than 5 minutes later, David rushed over. After learning what had happened, he ignored everyone present, balled his fist, and started pounding Mark's head. You live in son-in-law. You went and made such a huge mess. Do you want to die? Listen to me. If the company suffers any losses, you pack your things and get out immediately. Mark collapsed to the ground, clutching his head desperately, fleeing in all directions like a stray dog. David, also hot-tempered and tired of punching, picked up the ashtray on the table and smashed it down. Bright red blood welled from Mark's forehead. The scene was gruesome. This broke Cecilia's heart. She was just about to beg David for mercy when unexpectedly, David slapped her hard across the face, showing no pity. If you dare make another sound, you and him can get out of the Dew family and sever all father-daughter ties. To a businessman, profit is supreme. My husband hurried to cover my eyes, afraid the bloodiness would frighten me. His gesture made me laugh, as if he forgot what my profession is. I'm no stranger to gory scenes. He only meant to slap his face, but my husband went all out with a trump card and nearly caused a fatality. I dare not imagine how ruthless his methods would be in a courtroom. Ever since that farce, Cecilia never came back to hospital. The nurses said they even moved her entire prenatal file to another private clinic. I drew a deep breath and felt a heavy weight in my chest suddenly lift and dissolve. A few months later, my husband came home dejected, burying himself in my arms for comfort. "Honey, I lost the battle. Please comfort me." I stroked his head gently and asked casually, "Is it that case with the Duke Corporation?" He was silent for a long time, then sighed and nodded. We finally gathered favorable evidence and managed to minimize the losses. Who knew Mark would turn up drunk at the dinner table, spilling all that evidence? I was the underdog to begin with, and then the other side's lawyer turned the tables on me completely. I lost. Ethan pouted, his indignant expression making me burst out laughing. I cupped his face and planted several kisses on him. "Honey, so this is what you look like when you lose a case. So cute. I love it." At the unexpected confession, Ethan's eyes narrowed, a slow current of desire stirring within them. If my wife likes it that much, doesn't that mean I should put on a good show? Before I could react, he scooped me up and lifted me into the air. The next second, I was tossed onto the soft bed, sinking into tender, lingering embraces. A news item came out from inside the hospital. A certain hospital had been sued by the daughter of the DW family, accusing its equipment of causing fetal deformities. Cecilia had been confined to bed to protect the pregnancy for nearly 4 months. She had at last waited for the big anomaly scan, only to be told the fetus was malformed. Having already lost one child before, being told this about the current one completely broke her. She blamed the hospital for everything, claiming the equipment's radiation had harmed the fetus and demanding huge compensation. The day I learned she was pregnant, I had a bad feeling. Mark's genetic defect in the previous life would still be beyond the reach of current medicine. The twin surviving was nothing more than a brief, fading miracle. Now that I think about it, it's a good thing I didn't end up pregnant back then. Otherwise, both body and mind would have suffered. I never thought I'd see Mark again in this lifetime, but he came looking for me of his own accord. He was lingering by the hospital entrance, wearing a white t-shirt, stubbled, and looking like a vagrant. "Claire, I'm divorced." I ignored him and kept walking toward the parking lot. The Dew family company had suffered huge losses because of him, and even my daughter had endured nothing but hardship, although Cecilia hated it. Once she realized she would be unable to inherit the family fortune, she decided to give up love and choose marriage. He followed me, voice breaking with tears as he begged, "Wife, forgive me. I know I was wrong. You are the only one who has ever been sincere with me in this world. I promise I will never make you sad again." I glanced at him with disgust and said coldly, "What happens from now on is your own business. I'm very happy now. Please don't disturb me." Suddenly, Mark wrapped his arms around me from behind and let out a sinister laugh. "Who says we can't go back? If we die together again, we can return to how things were." I struggled desperately and shouted. He hauled me toward the river with all his strength, intending to plunge us back into the past. Just as the two of us fell, my arm was suddenly seized by a pair of hands. When I saw Ethan, it felt as if a beam of salvation had struck my face. He pulled me up with all his might and, as if finding something lost, held me tightly in his arms. "Sorry, wife, I'm late. Don't be afraid. From now on, no one will ever hurt you again." A warm tear fell onto my face. From now on, I know what I must cherish.